My name is Jessie, and at 35, I believed I truly knew my sister, Olivia. Our relationship had always been complicated, but I was a constant source of support for her, especially when she needed to find a new place to live. On her 27th birthday, at a party full of her affluent friends, I nervously gave her my special gift, an envelope with prepaid rent for a full year. Her face scrunched up as she read the card, and she then casually tossed it into the trash. She told me to find her a better gift and to come back in a year. My heart shattered as I quietly left without a word. Looking back, Olivia and I were different in nearly every way. I was the responsible one, a serious kid who saved her allowance and planned ahead. By the time I was 10, I was carefully budgeting my money to buy books or small gifts for my family. My teachers often praised me for my maturity and reliability. Olivia, on the other hand, was always the center of attention, charismatic and outgoing from the moment she could talk. She easily charmed adults and made friends, but she also developed a taste for luxury early on. By age 12, her unspoken rule was, "Why save for tomorrow when you can enjoy today?" While I was tutoring other kids to earn a little extra cash, Olivia was constantly asking our parents for expensive clothes and the latest gadgets, and they usually gave in, captivated by her bright smile and persuasive arguments. Our parents divorced when I was 15 and Olivia was 7. The split affected us in ways that would shape our relationship for decades. I became even more independent, realizing that our mom would have to work longer hours to support us. I took on a role as a second caretaker for Olivia, cooking dinner and helping with chores. My little sister, however, became more demanding and clingy. She feared being abandoned and sought comfort through material possessions. A new dress or toy from our mom would temporarily ease her anxiety. My mom, burdened by guilt over the divorce, couldn't bring herself to say no to Olivia. My mom would try to explain that Olivia needed extra support right now, after she'd buy my sister something extravagant, while telling me we couldn't afford something I actually needed. I tried to understand, but a pattern was being established that would continue into our adult lives. The biggest sacrifice I made came during my senior year of high school. I had a partial scholarship to an excellent university. It was my dream school, with the exact program I wanted, but it would have meant student loans and moving far from home. The night I got my acceptance letter, my mom sat me down, with tears in her eyes. She told me she knew how much the school meant to me, but had a huge favor to ask. She wanted me to consider the state college instead because Olivia was still struggling so much from the divorce, and my mom needed me at home. The state college was a decent school, but it wasn't exceptional. It was also only 20 minutes away, so I could live at home and keep helping my mom and sister. I could see the desperation in my mom's eyes, the exhaustion from working overtime and dealing with Olivia's emotional outbursts. After a sleepless night, I postponed my dream school acceptance and enrolled in the local college instead. I worked multiple jobs throughout college while still earning good grades. I waited tables in the mornings, took classes in the afternoons, and did administrative work in the evenings. On weekends, I helped Olivia with her homework and tried to be the stable presence she needed. I had no social life, and dating seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. During this time, Olivia's behavior became more and more concerning. By the age of 14, she was skipping classes and hanging out with older kids. By 16, she had been caught shoplifting twice. Each time, I was the one who left work to pick her up. I'd sit with her as store managers or counselors tried to understand why she kept making those choices. She'd look at me with exasperation and say I didn't understand, claiming I'd never had to fight for attention and that I was good at everything. The irony was painful because my whole life felt like one continuous struggle, but Olivia only saw what she wanted to see. Despite everything, Olivia was brilliant when she applied herself. Her standardized test scores were exceptional, and when she finally found motivation in her junior year, her grades improved dramatically. She got a full scholarship to a prestigious private university across the country. I was genuinely happy for her, even as I was finishing my own degree at the state college while working full-time. The day she left for college was emotional for all of us. My mom cried for hours, and I worried about how we would manage financially without her drama constantly taking center stage. As it turned out, life became unexpectedly peaceful. I finished my degree with honors and finally had time to focus on my career in financial consulting. I started in an entry-level position and worked hard to prove myself. My practical experience with budgeting gave me an advantage, and within 3 years, I had earned 2 promotions. At 27, I finally moved into my own apartment and began building the independent life I had postponed for so long. Meanwhile, Olivia would call home mostly when she needed something: extra money for a spring break trip, a new laptop when hers broke, or emergency funds because she'd overspent her allowance. Each time, my mom would call me in a panic, saying she couldn't afford to help her and begging me to just do it this one time. Of course, just this once happened every few months. I tried to set boundaries, suggesting Olivia get a part-time job like I had. But both she and my mom would resist my suggestions. My mom would always defend her, saying her school program was too difficult for her to also hold down a job and keep her grades up. I somehow managed to do both, but pointing this out only made them see me as bitter and unsupportive. So I kept sending money, paying for flights home, and covering emergency expenses. Every time, Olivia would profusely thank me and promise to pay me back as soon as possible, but those repayments never came. Despite the frustrations, I was proud of what I had accomplished. By 30, I had paid off my student loans, built a healthy savings account, and earned a reputation as a skilled financial advisor. My clients appreciated my practical approach to money management, never knowing that my expertise was hard-won through years of managing my family's complicated finances. After graduating with honors, Olivia surprised us by announcing she wanted to move to my city. I had mixed feelings. Part of me was excited to rebuild our relationship as adults, while another part worried that the old patterns would just continue. She promised me things would be different, saying she had matured a lot in college. She also mentioned the great job opportunities in my city and said that having me close by would help her get settled. Despite my reservations, I helped her look for apartments and jobs. When she arrived with 6 suitcases and barely enough money for her first month, I let her stay in my guest room until she got on her feet. She swore it would only be for a couple of weeks at most. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. Olivia did get a good entry-level job at a marketing firm, but her spending habits hadn't changed. She bought expensive work clothes, saying they were necessary to make the right impression. She joined costly fitness classes and exclusive networking events. Each time I gently suggested budgeting, she would become defensive. She'd patiently tell me I didn't get her industry, where appearances and connections were everything. She insisted she couldn't show up looking cheap or miss out on important events. When she finally moved into her own place, it was in an upscale building with amenities she didn't need and couldn't afford. I was concerned about her rent being nearly half her monthly income, but she just dismissed my worries. She said confidently that she'd be promoted fast and that this was an investment in her future. 3 months later, she called me in tears. She had maxed out 2 credit cards and couldn't make her rent. She asked if I could help her out just one time. Against my better judgment, I transferred enough money to cover the shortfall, with the clear understanding that it was a loan, not a gift. She promised she would pay me back the next month. The next month brought another crisis, another reason why repayment would have to wait. This cycle continued until I stopped answering her finance-related calls. Instead, she began showing up at my apartment without warning, usually with tears already streaming down her face. During one particularly dramatic visit, she confessed that she hadn't paid her rent for 3 consecutive months and had received an eviction notice. She wailed that they couldn't do this to her, asking where she was supposed to go and what would happen to all her things and her life. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that she was still my sister. I told her firmly that she had to find a more affordable place and that I could help her look for something that was actually within her budget. For once, Olivia seemed to listen. We spent a weekend looking at apartments, and I insisted on going with her to make sure she wasn't swayed by unnecessary luxuries. We eventually found a clean, basic 1-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. The rent was reasonable, and the location was a manageable commute to her job. She looked around the empty rooms with clear disappointment, saying the place was so plain. I retorted that it was within her budget and had everything she needed. Reluctantly, she applied and was approved, though the landlord required a larger security deposit because of her eviction history. Again, I helped cover the cost, telling myself this would be the last time. Moving day was chaos. Olivia had far more stuff than could possibly fit into her new, smaller space. She became more and more agitated as she realized she would have to get rid of a lot of her things. She dramatically announced that the situation was impossible and that she couldn't live like that. I spent hours helping her organize and donate items, and we arranged her furniture to make the most of the space. By the end of the weekend, the apartment was functional and actually looked quite nice, but Olivia remained unconvinced. Around this time, something unexpected happened at my job. Our team had significantly exceeded our annual goals, and we received substantial performance bonuses. My share was enough to make a real difference in my investment portfolio or maybe fund the vacation I had been putting off for years. As I looked at the deposit notification, a different idea came to mind. Olivia's birthday was coming up, and she was still struggling to adjust to her new financial reality. What if I used part of my bonus to give her some breathing room? If I paid her rent for a year, she could focus on paying down her credit card debt and learning to budget properly without the immediate pressure of monthly housing payments. The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. This wouldn't just be enabling her bad habits, but a thoughtful gift that addressed her real needs while giving her time to develop financial responsibility. I called her landlord and arranged to prepay 12 months of rent, asking for a formal letter confirming the arrangement that I could present to Olivia. When the letter arrived, I put it in a simple but elegant envelope with a birthday card explaining the gift. I wrote about my hopes for her future and offered to help her create a financial plan during the coming year, emphasizing that this wasn't just a handout but an opportunity for a fresh start. As her birthday approached, I was genuinely excited about my gift for the first time in years. This wasn't another last-minute purchase or emergency bailout. It was thoughtful, practical, and exactly what she needed. I imagined her relief, her gratitude, and perhaps a turning point in our relationship. For once, I believed I had found the perfect way to help my sister. Olivia had planned her 27th birthday celebration at an expensive rooftop bar. When I arrived with my card and gift, I immediately felt out of place. The venue had minimalist furniture, soft lighting, and panoramic city views that must have cost a fortune. Servers walked around with trays of colorful cocktails and fancy appetizers that probably cost more than a reasonable dinner. Her friends were all impeccably dressed in designer clothes, exchanging air kisses and loud compliments. I knew a few from social media, but had met very few in person, even though Olivia had been living in my city for nearly a year. I smoothed down my simple black dress, suddenly self-conscious that it wasn't new or fashionable. Olivia spotted me and waved excitedly. She looked stunning in a sequined dress I'd never seen before, with professionally styled hair and makeup. When I approached, I expected her to introduce me to the group she was with, but instead, she just squeezed my arm and went back to her conversation about an exclusive industry event she had attended. I stood awkwardly for a few minutes before getting a drink. At the bar, I mentally calculated the probable cost of the party and winced. Based on the venue and the number of guests, Olivia must have spent at least $2,000, money she definitely didn't have. I wondered if she had opened another credit card just for this. Throughout the evening, I tried to talk to her friends, but our conversations were shallow. When I mentioned my work in financial consulting, their eyes would glaze over and they'd quickly find a reason to get another drink. It became obvious that Olivia had told them very little about me and that what she had shared was likely negative. One of the women I spoke to said that my sister seemed so sensible, but the way she said it made it feel like an insult. After dinner and several rounds of drinks, it was time for presents. Olivia clapped excitedly as she was led to a central table piled with elegantly wrapped gifts. I hung back, watching her open one luxury item after another, a designer handbag, an expensive perfume set, artisanal spirits, and even a ridiculously expensive pair of sunglasses. With each gift, she would squeal with delight, hugging the person who gave it to her and making a big show of how perfect and thoughtful it was. I clutched my envelope tighter, suddenly nervous about how my practical gift would be received in this atmosphere of obvious wealth and excess. Finally, all the wrapped packages were gone, and Olivia looked around with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward and told her I had something for her as I handed her the envelope. She took it with a slight furrow in her brow, clearly expecting something small like a gift card. The envelope felt heavy in her hand, holding the official letter from her landlord and my card. Her expression was already one of disappointment. She asked what it was, and I smiled, encouraging her to open it and see. The room had become quieter as people with cocktails in hand watched, curious about the plain envelope after all the fancy gifts. Olivia first pulled out the card, reading my message quickly before pulling out the official letter. I explained that I had paid her rent for the next 12 months, telling her that her apartment was completely covered until the following year. My intention was to give her a chance to catch up on other expenses and start saving without having to worry about housing costs. I had hoped for relief, maybe even tears of gratitude. Instead, I saw Olivia's face contort from confusion to embarrassment to pure rage in a matter of seconds. Her cheeks turned dark red as she stared at the letter. She asked me in a rising voice if I had paid her rent, as if I saw her as some charity case who couldn't afford to live without my help. I started to explain that wasn't what I meant at all, but she cut me off. She asked if I had any idea how humiliating it was. She gestured wildly at her friends, who were watching with uncomfortable fascination. She said that everyone had given her beautiful, thoughtful gifts, and her own sister had given her a reminder that she thought she was a financial failure. I told her that was unfair, my voice surprisingly steady despite my pounding heart. I said that this was a substantial gift, and I just wanted to help her in a meaningful way. She laughed harshly and said I wanted to control her, as always. She accused me of thinking she couldn't manage on her own, so her big sister had to step in and save the day. Her words stung, especially because they completely twisted the truth of our relationship. Before I could respond, she crumpled the letter and threw both it and my card into a nearby trash bin. She announced loudly that I should find her something better and come back in a year before turning away from me toward her friends, who were now whispering among themselves. The room suddenly felt suffocating. Some people were openly staring, while others pretended to be very interested in their drinks or the city view. I stood there, frozen, the full weight of the public humiliation settling on me like a physical burden. Without saying another word, I turned and walked toward the exit. No one called after me or tried to stop me. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Olivia one last time, already laughing with her friends. My gift and our relationship had been discarded as easily as the envelope in the trash. The drive home passed in a blur. My eyes were clouded with unshed tears as I gripped the steering wheel, navigating through late-night traffic. The cheerful pop song on the radio felt like it was making fun of my pain, so I turned it off, preferring silence. By the time I got to my apartment, the initial shock had been replaced by a deep, aching hurt that felt like a stone in my chest. I kicked off my shoes in the entryway and sank onto my couch in the dark, finally letting the tears fall freely. What hurt most wasn't just the rejection of my gift, but her complete dismissal of my intentions. The gift represented a significant part of the bonus money I had earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. More than that, it had been given with genuine love and concern for Olivia's well-being. The fact that she had treated it as an insult, as some kind of power play, twisted everything I thought I knew about our relationship. As I sat in my darkened living room, memories flooded back. I thought about the time I had skipped my senior class trip to help pay for Olivia's middle school band instrument. I remembered the summer internship I had turned down because my mom needed help with Olivia at home. I thought about the countless times I had transferred her $20 here, $50 there, which had added up to thousands of dollars over the years that she had never even acknowledged, much less repaid. I wondered if Olivia had ever truly appreciated any of it, or if she had simply come to expect my support as something she was entitled to, resenting me for providing what she felt she should receive. My phone vibrated with a text message from our mother. I read it in disbelief. She said she had just heard what happened and asked why I would embarrass my sister like that at her party, saying I knew how important appearances were to her and that I should call her. Of course, Olivia had already called her with her version of events. And of course, my mom had immediately taken her side, as she always did. I silenced my phone and tossed it aside. Sleep didn't come that night. I scrolled through old photos on my laptop, looking at pictures of Olivia and me through the years. In almost every one, I could see the dynamic that had defined us: me, the responsible caretaker, and Olivia, the carefree recipient of everyone's attention and concern. I wondered when this pattern had become so ingrained and why I had let it continue into adulthood. Around 3 in the morning, I found myself looking at my bank statements, adding up all the financial support I had given Olivia just in the past year. The total was staggering, nearly $15,000 in loans that we both knew would never be repaid. Add to that the prepaid rent, and I had given her more than many parents provide to their adult children. As dawn broke, a painful thought became clear. My help wasn't helping. By constantly bailing Olivia out, I was preventing her from experiencing the natural consequences of her choices. And even worse, my assistance was interpreted not as generosity, but as a judgment, which was fueling a resentment that was poisoning our relationship. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and composed an email to Olivia's landlord. I explained that there had been a misunderstanding and that I needed to cancel the arrangement for the prepaid rent. I asked that only the current month remain paid and that the rest of the funds be returned to my account. After sending the email, I felt a mix of complex emotions. I felt guilty knowing that Olivia would immediately face housing insecurity. But I also felt a surprising sense of relief at finally setting a boundary that was long overdue. And beneath it all, there was a profound sadness for what our relationship had become. My phone had accumulated several missed calls and increasingly angry texts from both Olivia and our mother. I ignored them all and called in sick to work for the first time in years. Then I did something I had never allowed myself to do before. I made an appointment with a therapist. I told the receptionist that I needed to understand why I kept sacrificing myself for people who didn't appreciate it and that I needed to learn how to stop. As I finally drifted into an exhausted sleep that morning, one thought gave me a small measure of peace. For the first time in our adult lives, I was treating Olivia not as a dependent child, but as the grown woman she claimed to be. Maybe that was the most loving thing I could do for both of us. For the next 3 days, I kept my distance from my family. I silenced notifications, deleted voicemails without listening to them, and focused on regaining my emotional stability. At work, I threw myself into projects, grateful for the structured distraction of spreadsheets and client meetings. In the evenings, I began reading books about family dynamics and codependency. Each page revealed patterns I had never been able to name before. My first therapy session was both uncomfortable and illuminating. The therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Powell, listened without judgment as I described my relationship with Olivia and our mother. She observed that it sounded like I had been cast in the role of the family rescuer and asked me to consider what would happen if I stepped out of that role. The question haunted me. Who would I be if I wasn't the responsible one, the fixer, the provider? I had built my entire identity around being dependable, often at the expense of my own needs and desires. On the 4th day, I finally checked my messages. There were 23 texts and 15 missed calls from Olivia. The tone of her messages had gone from indignant to panicked over the past few days. The most recent one, sent that morning, made my stomach clench. She said that her landlord told her the rent was no longer paid and asked what I had done. She said she had received a 3-day notice and told me to call her immediately. There were also several messages from our mother, each one more accusatory than the last. She claimed I was being petty and vindictive, punishing Olivia for a momentary lack of gratitude. The final voicemail from her included a threat: if I didn't fix the situation immediately, I shouldn't expect to be welcome at family gatherings in the future. Instead of calling either of them, I sent Olivia a short, factual text. I told her that I had canceled the prepaid rent arrangement after she had made it clear the gift was unwanted. I said this month was paid, but future months were her responsibility, as they always had been. Her response was immediate and explosive, a stream of texts alternating between rage and desperation. She called me cruel, heartless, and manipulative. She asked how I could do this to her and where she was supposed to find rent money in 3 days, and if I wanted her to be homeless. I didn't respond to any more messages, even though each one felt like a physical blow. That evening, my doorbell rang repeatedly, and she pounded on my door, calling my name. I sat motionless on my couch with the lights off until she finally gave up and left. 2 days later, I received an email from Olivia's landlord confirming that the prepaid rent had been refunded to my account, minus the current month. He also mentioned, in a professionally neutral tone, that eviction proceedings would begin if the tenant didn't make payment arrangements immediately. I felt a wave of nausea reading this, imagining Olivia packing her belongings under duress. I had to remind myself over and over that this was the natural consequence of her choices, not mine. She had a good job and friends with expensive tastes who seemed to value her company. She had options that didn't include me opening my wallet yet again. True to the landlord's word, Olivia was evicted exactly 1 week after her birthday party. I didn't hear this from her directly, but from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned seeing Olivia moving her things into a friend's apartment. The acquaintance said cautiously that she seemed really stressed and had mentioned something about a family emergency and financial difficulties and asked if everything was okay. I gave a vague response, unwilling to air our family drama but also refusing to accept blame for a situation Olivia had created. Later that evening, I received a text from an unknown number, which turned out to be from Olivia's friend. She said that my sister was sleeping on her couch right now because she had nowhere else to go and that she thought I should know since I was her family. She said Olivia was too proud to tell me herself. This was clearly meant to shame me into action, but it had the opposite effect. If Olivia had wealthy friends willing to take her in temporarily, she was far from destitute. And the fact that she was sending her friends to make me feel guilty instead of taking responsibility herself only confirmed that I had made the right decision. Still, I couldn't help worrying about her. Despite everything, she was my sister, and decades of caring for her couldn't be switched off overnight. I found myself checking her social media accounts, looking for clues about her situation. Surprisingly, her online presence remained cheerful. She posted photos at restaurants and bars, documenting nights out with friends as if nothing had changed. Only someone who knew her well would notice the subtle signs of strain, the same outfits appearing more frequently, the locations becoming slightly less exclusive, the forced brightness of her smile. 2 weeks after the eviction, I got another update, this time from our mother. She said in an accusing tone during a brief phone call that Olivia had been sleeping on friends' couches and that none of her so-called friends would let her stay more than a few days. She said Olivia couldn't keep bouncing around like this and that I needed to help her. I asked her what about her. Could Olivia stay with her for a while? There was a long pause. She finally said that I knew she didn't have the space, which was true. After the divorce, my mom had moved into a small one-bedroom condo. Besides, she said, Olivia needed to be in the city for her job. I suggested that perhaps she should find a more affordable apartment or a roommate situation, saying there were other options that didn't involve me paying her rent. My mom replied that she couldn't believe how cold I had become before hanging up. That night, I cried again, but the tears felt different. They weren't just for the current situation, but for all the years I had spent trying to earn approval by taking care of everyone except myself. I was grieving not only the relationship I had with my sister and mother, but also the relationship I might have had if healthier boundaries had been established long ago. As difficult as this period was, I began to notice subtle shifts in my own life. Without the constant drain of Olivia's emergencies, I had more energy for my own pursuits. I joined a book club I had been interested in for months. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I even went on a date for the first time in years, a coffee meeting with a kind man from my office building that led to pleasant conversation and tentative plans for dinner. They were small changes, but they represented something huge. I was finally creating space for my own life to grow. 3 weeks after Olivia's birthday, I came home from work to find her sitting on the floor outside my apartment door. She looked different than I had ever seen her. Her typically perfect appearance was disheveled. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a plain t-shirt. Her eyes were red-rimmed, likely from crying or a lack of sleep, or maybe both. She stood when she saw me, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. She said we needed to talk. I unlocked my door and gestured for her to come inside, mentally preparing myself for another emotional manipulation. But as we sat across from each other in my living room, I was determined to maintain the boundaries I had been working so hard to establish. She started by saying I had ruined her life. She said she had lost her apartment and had been sleeping on couches for weeks, and that her friends were starting to avoid her calls because they were tired of her asking for help. I took a deep breath. I told her carefully that I was sorry she was struggling, but I hadn't created the situation. She looked at me in disbelief. She said I had canceled the rent payments and that I knew she couldn't afford it on such short notice. I told her as gently as I could that she had rejected my gift publicly and definitively, and that she had thrown it in the trash and told me to come back with something better. She said it was a party and she was embarrassed. She asked why I couldn't have just given her jewelry or something normal like everyone else had. This was so typically Olivia that I almost laughed despite the tension. I said the gift I had given her was worth far more than any jewelry I could afford. I said it was practical, thoughtful, and it addressed a real need in her life. She countered that now she had an even bigger need. She needed a place to stay until she could find a new apartment. Olivia wanted me out by the weekend. I had been expecting this request and had already decided on my answer. You cannot stay here, I said firmly. But I am happy to help you look for affordable housing options or connect you with roommate search websites. Her face darkened. So that is it. After all these years, you are just going to abandon me when I need you most. Before I could respond, there was another knock at my door. When I opened it, our mother stood in the hallway, her expression a mix of worry and accusation. I knew I would find you both here, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to sort this out as a family. What followed was one of the most difficult conversations of my life. Mom immediately sided with Olivia, reinforcing the idea that I was being cruel and unfeeling. When I tried to explain the years of financial support I had provided, both of them minimized my contributions. That is what family does, Mom insisted. We help each other without keeping score. But it has only ever gone one way, I pointed out. When have either of you supported me financially or otherwise? This question was met with an uncomfortable silence, broken eventually by Olivia's scoff. You have never needed help. You have always been perfect with your savings and your responsible job and your spotless credit. Those things did not happen by accident, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. They happened because I worked multiple jobs through college. Because I budget carefully and live within my means. Because I make difficult choices every day about what I can and cannot afford. Not everyone can be a financial genius like you, Olivia shot back. This is not about financial genius, I insisted. This is about basic adult responsibility. You make good money, Olivia. You simply choose to spend it on things you want rather than things you need, and then expect me to cover the difference. The argument continued in circles with accusations and defenses from all sides. Finally, exhausted, I stood up. I love you both, I said firmly. But I am no longer willing to enable behaviors that are harmful to Olivia and to our relationship. I will not provide money. I will not offer housing. What I will offer is support in finding solutions that Olivia can sustain independently. Mom left shortly after, disappointed and angry. Olivia stayed longer, cycling through tactics that I now recognized clearly: anger, guilt, manipulation, and finally, when nothing worked, a grudging consideration of my offer to help her find a sustainable living situation. By the end of the evening, we had created a list of affordable apartment options and roommate search resources. It was not the immediate rescue she had hoped for, but it was a path forward that did not depend on my bank account. The next day, I received an unexpected call from my father. We had maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce, speaking occasionally, but never particularly close. He had heard about the situation from Mom, but his perspective surprised me. "I think you are doing the right thing," he said without preamble. "It is about time someone in this family let Olivia face reality." His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "It does not feel right," I admitted. "I keep wondering if I am being cruel. Sometimes love looks like standing back and letting someone figure things out for themselves," he said. "I wish I had learned that lesson sooner with both of you girls, and with your mother for that matter." He went on to share his own regrets about the patterns established in our family. How he had worked long hours to provide the lifestyle Mom wanted. How he had let her handle the day-to-day parenting without enough involvement. How he had seen the unhealthy dynamics developing but had not known how to address them. "Olivia was 5 when I realized she had learned to manipulate your mother perfectly," he said. "And by then, it seemed too late to change course." This conversation with my father provided a perspective I had never considered, placing our family dynamics in a broader context. It did not excuse Olivia's behavior or my mother's enabling, but it helped me understand how these patterns had developed over generations. In the weeks that followed, Olivia was forced to make significant changes. Unable to find friends willing to host her indefinitely, and with our mother's small condo genuinely too small for both of them, she had to quickly find a new living situation. She ended up sharing an apartment with 2 other young women in a much less fashionable neighborhood than she was accustomed to. More significantly, she had to take on additional work to afford even this more modest arrangement. She began freelancing on weekends, using her marketing skills to help small businesses with their social media presence. It was unglamorous work compared to her day job at the trendy agency, but it provided the additional income she desperately needed. Each step was difficult for her. Each adjustment was accompanied by complaints and occasional backsliding into old patterns of expecting rescue. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. Necessity became, if not exactly the mother of virtue, at least the catalyst for growth. 6 months after Olivia's disastrous birthday party, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The boundaries I had established had initially felt like walls constructed out of necessity, isolating me from my family. Over time, they evolved into something healthier, clearly marked lines that everyone, including myself, could recognize and respect. My weekly therapy sessions continued, helping me untangle the complex web of family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. I learned to identify the difference between genuine generosity and codependent enabling. I practiced saying no without guilt and yes without resentment. Most importantly, I began to understand that taking care of myself was not selfish but essential. With the emotional and financial burden of constantly rescuing Olivia lifted, I discovered energy for pursuits long neglected. I joined a hiking group that explored local trails every weekend. I enrolled in a photography class I had been interested in for years. I even started dating more actively, learning to be vulnerable with others in ways that felt healthy rather than depleting. The relationship with James, the kind man from my office building, developed slowly but steadily. He was thoughtful and self-sufficient, with a quiet confidence I found deeply attractive. On our 5th date, when I cautiously shared some of my family history, his response was refreshingly straightforward. "It sounds like you have been carrying everyone else's responsibilities for a long time," he observed. "No wonder you are tired." That simple acknowledgement, free of judgment or advice, felt like permission to set down burdens I had not even realized I was still carrying. My relationship with my mother remained strained, but was slowly improving. After several weeks of minimal contact following the confrontation in my apartment, she reached out with a tentative olive branch. "I have been thinking about what you said," she admitted during a brief phone call about support only going one way. "I cannot say you are wrong." It was not exactly an apology, but it was a start. We began having coffee together occasionally, our conversations carefully avoiding the topic of Olivia at first, then gradually addressing it with increasing honesty. During one such meeting, Mom surprised me by sharing her own insecurities. "After your father left, I was terrified of failing as a parent," she confessed. "Olivia was so emotional, so demanding. It seemed easier to give her what she wanted than to deal with the tantrums. I told myself I was protecting her from more trauma, but maybe I was just protecting myself from difficult parenting. This glimpse into her perspective did not erase the years of unequal treatment, but it helped me understand it better. She had been doing the best she could with the emotional tools she had available, just as I had been. As for Olivia, her journey proved more transformative than I could have imagined. The first few months were rough. She called occasionally, usually when facing some new financial challenge, testing whether my boundaries would hold. Each time I offered practical advice instead of money, suggestions instead of solutions. Gradually, the nature of her calls changed. She shared small victories, like negotiating a lower rate on her credit card, finding an affordable furniture piece for the apartment, and cooking meals at home instead of eating out. Each achievement was delivered with a mixture of pride and lingering resentment, as if she still wanted me to know how difficult this new lifestyle was for her. For months after moving into the shared apartment, she was laid off from her marketing job during a company restructuring. In the past, this would have triggered an immediate financial crisis and frantic calls for help. Instead, she threw herself into her freelance work, expanding her client base, and even raising her rates as her portfolio grew. "It is actually working out better than the agency job," she admitted during one of our now regular phone conversations. "I make my own schedule and I can be pickier about the clients I take on." The real breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, nearly 6 months to the day after her birthday. My phone rang while I was at work, and I answered to hear Olivia's voice, unusually subdued. "Do you have time to meet for coffee after work?" she asked. "There is something I need to say to you." We met at a simple cafe near my office, nothing like the upscale establishments she used to prefer. She was already seated when I arrived, with 2 cups of coffee on the table, including mine, prepared exactly how I liked it. "I owe you an apology," she said as soon as I sat down, the words coming out in a rush, as if she had rehearsed them but was afraid she might lose her nerve. "A real one, not just for the birthday thing, but for everything. For taking you for granted all these years. For expecting you to fix my problems. For not appreciating what you were trying to do for me." I sat in stunned silence as she continued, explaining how the past months had forced her to confront realities about herself she had always avoided. How she had begun to recognize patterns in her other relationships that mirrored what had happened between us. How she had started keeping a budget for the first time in her life and discovered a sense of accomplishment in managing her own finances. "The thing is," she said, looking down at her coffee, "no one has ever believed I could handle things on my own. Not Mom, not my friends, not even me. Except you. You always tried to teach me, and I always resented you for it because it was easier than trying." Tears filled my eyes as I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "I always knew you were capable," I said softly. "I just did not know how to help you see it, too." We talked for hours that afternoon, more honestly than we ever had before. We talked about our childhood, our parents, the dynamics that had shaped us both. We talked about her new, more modest lifestyle and my slowly expanding horizons, and about the possibility of building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. As we prepared to leave, Olivia handed me an envelope. For a moment, my heart sank, thinking she was asking for money after all. Instead, when I opened it, I found a check for a small amount along with a handwritten note. "This is the first installment," she had written. "I cannot repay everything at once, but I can start. Thank you for believing in me enough to stop rescuing me." The amount was symbolic rather than significant, but its meaning was immeasurable. It represented not just a financial acknowledgement, but a fundamental shift in how Olivia saw herself and our relationship. In the months that followed, our family began a slow healing process. We established new traditions, like a monthly dinner where everyone contributed something to the meal. We practiced more open communication with varying degrees of success, but consistent effort. Most importantly, we began to recognize and name the unhealthy patterns that had defined us for so long, the first step toward changing them. Today, nearly a year after that fateful birthday party, Olivia lives in a small but charming apartment she can comfortably afford. Her freelance business has grown steadily, allowing her to be selective about clients and projects. She still enjoys nice things, but has learned to save for them rather than expecting immediate gratification. As for me, I have discovered that setting boundaries does not diminish love, but clarifies it. By stepping back from the role of family rescuer, I created space for authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than dependency. My relationship with James continues to deepen, all the more meaningful because it is freely chosen rather than another obligation to fulfill. The most profound lesson I have learned through this journey is that true love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. It means trusting them enough to find their own solutions rather than imposing yours. It means believing that they can survive disappointment and emerge stronger from challenges. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love is not protection from life's difficulties, but faith in their ability to overcome them. Have you ever had to step back and let someone you love face the consequences of their actions? Was it as difficult for you as it was for me? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of family dynamics and personal growth. And remember, setting healthy boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of love for both yourself and others. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to establish the boundaries you need in your own relationships.